add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
This is hiring.
Hiring on all cylinders.
Hello again, recruiting pals. Rob Stevenson here at the helm of Hiring on All Cylinders, and once more shall we endeavor to join eHearts and eHands with you as our voices course through space and time to fill your ears with the sweet, darling, melodic sonic textures of talent advice. Today is another doozy for you, so much so that our very own VP of Talent, Jill of All Trades Witty, has joined me. Jill, welcome back.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be back.
Are you cool with the Jill of All Trades nickname? I had one for Amina, and I was like, I can't leave Jill high and dry.
I appreciate that. I feel like nicknames are one of those things that when you don't have them and other people do, you're a little bit jealous.
Yeah,
so.
like, well, what's mine? Yeah.
Oh, good question. By the next podcast, I'll come up with one for you.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. I feel like Jill of All Trades was apropos. Mother, talent exec, wife, polyglot, spirit distiller. You do it all.
Former spirit distiller. That's true. Right.
I need to know about this.
Oh, yeah.
Should we dive into the Jill Witty spirits?
No. So we can talk about that some other time. Okay. But yeah, that was a former life. Also former caterer and chef.
That's right.
The Daily Gourmet was my moniker.
How about that? And podcaster. She does it all. And
number one fangirl.
That's right. HOAC fangirl. I love that too. So I want to catch up on all things Intello talent, but I also don't want to leave our guest high and dry. So joining me is the former director of global talent for Mozilla, then VP of people at Instacart. He was a consultant and advisor at a menagerie of companies after that, and now has co-founded Talent Remastered. Mathew Caldwell is in the studio. Matthew, how the heck are you?
Very good, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I have a million questions for you, so much that I want to catch up on. But Jill, you want to bring us up to speed on what's going on in the Intello talent machine?
Sure. So I was on the East Coast last week. I spoke at the SHRM conference in Virginia, which was a lot of fun. That's where I'm from, so always good to be back home. And spoke about innovative sourcing strategies. So without plugging our own product too much, I did go into some things that companies are thinking about in 2017 and beyond for how to find untapped talent that they haven't thought before. So that went really well. And then I moved on up to New York and managed to avoid the snow, but only just... I did make it. I traveled the day after the big snowstorm, and hosted a fantastic dinner with some talent executives from a lot of Fortune 500s, actually. So it was interesting. Normally I'm sort of in my own world of startup talent acquisition, but I love chatting with talent leaders from much larger companies, especially when I discovered that really, at the end of the day, we all have the same kinds of problems. It's getting your executive team aligned. It's working with hiring managers on that impossible rec. It's headcount planning and wishing you had vision out for 12 or 18 months instead of 1 quarter. So we're all encountering those problems, and it was a great conversation.
Any key takeaways or mind-blowing nuggets that you're bringing back?
Oh, mind-blowing nuggets.
Give me mind-blowing nuggets. Sorry, I've never said that before. I don't know if I'm married to that.
No, not so many mind-blowing nuggets. I had one really interesting conversation at that dinner, and that was around diversity, which we all know is sort of approached in a certain way when you're thinking of diversity in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity or nationality. But there's so much more diversity of thought out there, and one person in particular had a real challenge at her organization getting people to think beyond certain kinds of mindsets that they were stuck in, and how to screen for that diversity of mindset, even if by all physical appearance we don't seem diverse one to the other. So I really enjoyed that conversation because diversity and inclusion are really important to me.
So that diversity of thought, would that take the form of like, this is an institutional, like, we've always done it this way kind of thing?
So imagine if your company makes hardware, and so you have a bias toward people who have been tinkerers all their lives. But maybe people who haven't tinkered actually have an approach to hardware that you've never considered. But your company doesn't want to hire people who are not tinkerers. So that kind of thing where,
okay.
Or the classic, if you're hiring for sales and you're only looking for athletes,
Right.
you know?
It's diversity of thought. I think for me, it's the key to diversity. When you think about diversity, is like how you get the people in the door. Diversity of thought is what makes a company agile and successful. But it's super hard to do because of what you just talked about. Is like if you've got this profile that you think is the right profile, and you build all your score sheets around that, and your way of building out, job descriptions and things like that, and profiles around that. How do you get people to think outside that box? How do you get people to recognize good people who don't fit that tinker or that athlete mindset, but bring something really good in? And I think it's a big challenge in our role.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So then how would a talent leader go about identifying those limiting biases?
I think it's important to challenge, when a recruiter or a hiring manager or in partnership come up with the job description and they come up with a set of interview questions, and even if they have a structured interview process, to sort of push back on, well, why do you think that this profile is going to be the right one for the role? Or, what if someone brought these 5 things to the table but didn't have this kind of background? Could they not also be successful? So I think in the very beginning, when you're setting up the role and you're setting up the process, that's the first place that you can identify potential biases.
I also think like being very sensitive to people's passion, and if somebody's really passionate about something, that can be an indicator that someone will be very good at it, even if their background is not the traditional background, even if the way they answer a question is not the traditional way. At Mozilla, we had, one of our best engineers was a classically trained, or I'm not even sure, but it was some sort of musician, classically trained musician, and he started tinkering with engineering on the side, software engineering on the side, fell in love with it. He didn't have any job experience prior to coming to Mozilla, and then he got the job because he started. For Mozilla, it was an easy entry because he was volunteering, and people were like, "Well, this guy's checking in great code. Who is this guy? We need to find out more about him." He wouldn't have probably found his way into any other organization except for somebody like a company like that. And yet now he's one of the best engineers that they've got. And it's because he has the passion and he trained himself. But would he have ever shown up on anybody's radar any other way? Most likely not.
This reminds me a little bit of what Bailey Douglas was talking about when she was in here a couple of weeks ago. And she mentioned that if there's, her point is more related to like the nice to haves versus positive indicators that a hiring manager will provide when they give you a job rec. And her method of combating that was like, if there's something you suspect is a positive indicator, find a great candidate who doesn't have that thing, and then say, would you still want to talk to that person? Hiring manager says yes. And you go, okay, well then that thing's not a must-have. So this in the same way would be in the case that you were like, we're only going to talk to engineers from these schools or with this specific background. It's on the recruiter to find a great candidate who doesn't have that and say, would you still want to talk to this person? Yes. Okay. Well, then you are limiting the scope of potential candidates by putting in this, in a lot of cases, arbitrary sort of fasten.
Yeah. Good executive search recruiters do a good job of this. When they get a spec from a exec at a company, what they oftentimes will do is they call them calibration candidates, so that the exec doesn't feel obligated to like this is an interview and they're not wasting their time. They position it that this is a calibration to help us understand what you want better. And what they do is they give them candidates from all sorts of different backgrounds, and then during the process of them talking to these calibration candidates, then the exec's like, wow, actually I would never have thought this person would be the type of person, but I really like them and I want that. And so there's ways to think about maybe introducing that into non-exec search, where you help people see, like you just brought out, candidates that can do the job but would never show up on the radar of the hiring manager.
Right. I love that, the notion of calibration candidates. So these would be people that you would produce and say, look, this person didn't apply. I'm not going to reach out to this person yet, maybe, but just like, is this the kind of person you want to talk to? And then would the goal there to present, like, the goal would be to present a bunch of those and just sort of triangulate with the hiring manager, what's the best looking person for this?
Exactly. And what you'll end up seeing is that they're like, I really like this out of this person that I didn't bring up, but after talking to them. So this is more than just the resume. This is actually getting them to talk to people, because when they have the conversation with them, that's when they start learning all these other things about them and the passions and things that might make them a good fit for the role. And so when they have these conversations with the people from various broad different backgrounds, from there, they might either identify, this is a type of profile I never would have gone after, but we should go after. Or they might realize that there's certain characteristics out of a certain type of background that they want to focus on that they never would have thought about before.
Right.
So Matt, I'm actually curious because I've seen this with executive search too, in this idea of the calibration candidates, and I see how it works really well. I'm wondering, how have you ever been able to bring that in-house and have that same methodology of calibrating early? Because one thing that we have experienced here that I think is sometimes challenging is the people who go early in process begin to get calibrated because you very rarely hire the first person you meet for a role.
Yeah.
However, the people who come at the very end of the process, let's say the CEO or maybe a VP of XYZ, are not calibrated. So often we will only put a candidate in front of them when actually this is the person we think we're going to hire. And then sometimes the feedback we get is, oh yeah, they were, I like this, I didn't like that, but I'm not calibrated. So how have you seen this work without wasting too much of that executive's time?
Yeah, so I think in that scenario, especially when you're talking about basically someone that comes in at the end, I like to get those individuals bought in on the fact that they really, in that interview, are not really making a hire, no hire decision unless there's some major red flag. Their job there is to do some culture fit, especially if they're the CEO or the founder of the company. That's their company, and they need to be committed to it. So they need to do some culture, add culture. I don't like the word culture fit, but they need to assess their ability to add to the culture of the organization. Values fit. And they also need to just see if there's any major red flags that they pick up that nobody else did. Usually, if the process is working right, there aren't. We all know what the CEO likes or doesn't like, and so we are going to make sure that this person doesn't, hit those type of issues with the CEO. But you want them to pretty much take on the role of selling the company and selling the opportunity, and really, helping this person understand the long-term passion behind why the CEO started this company and the vision for the company more than anything else. I really. You want to respect the CEO's time or these executives' times and not really get them in a position where it's a hire, no hire.
Right. They're the closer.
Yeah, they're the closer. Yeah.
I guess this whole calibration thing is not just during spec kickoff, right? Like you said, it's important to have feedback on once the hiring manager actually speaks to this person. So then it's a matter of getting good interview feedback, and then not just saying, okay, yeah, you did a good job interviewing, you evaluated the candidate. I can interpret that as what an ideal candidate is, or what this hiring manager liked, didn't like about the person. Yeah,
I mean, so every interaction you have with every person in the process internally is an opportunity for you to recalibrate the top of the funnel. And even the people in the middle of the funnel. So
much more eloquent.
Yeah, that was much better.
So yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a phone screener, whether it's a person reviewing their code if they're doing some sort of coding challenge ahead of time, whoever it is, you always want to check in and get feedback from that person, ideally when it's fresh, so that you can then take a look at everything that's in the funnel above that. And maybe you've got some people in the funnel above that you were excited about, but then hearing the feedback from this person. On this specific candidate, you realize, these two people in the funnel aren't going to be a fit, so you can pull them out. So you're not spending a bunch of time on candidates who aren't going to make it through the process. One of the things that you need to really focus on, especially when you talk about scaling like crazy, is being efficient and not spending time on things you shouldn't spend time on. And so, yeah, that's every single one of those interactions is an opportunity to refine the process.
What are some of those other things that you shouldn't be spending time on?
That you shouldn't be spending time on?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. I don't know if people saw how many people saw the Lightspeed survey, the study that came out recently.
We had Luke on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Luke is great. Yeah, and so I'll just kind of probably repeat what some of the stuff he said. I was happy to see that survey validated the fact that there is no correlation between having people do take-home challenges and quality of hire.
Right.
That was something that I have had disagreements with customers, hiring managers in the past, clients in the past. And when I say customer, I mean even when I was working internally, I view my CTO, my hiring managers as customers. And seeing that hard data is great because it helps us realize that is. You're asking a candidate to spend 4 to 5 hours of their time at home when they could be spending time with their kids or their whatever's important to them. And if they're talking to 5 companies, that means 20 hours that they're supposed to spend on these things. That just doesn't happen, and it's not fair. There's got to be a better way to do it. The reason why companies do that is because the engineers, and not just engineers, but the internal employees that are involved in the interview process don't want to waste their time talking to someone who's not good. And so they feel like, well, this is my way to ensure that anybody I spend time with is good. there's other ways to assess when somebody's good, so that when they come in-house, you're not wasting people's time. So I would say don't waste time on giving people long challenges on the front end. Find other ways to assess whether or not they have the skills and the cultural qualities and values that you think are important for the job.
I couldn't agree more. And here that takes the form of like paired programming. So working with other team members, and which is also is a more accurate reflection of what the job will be like, right? Like if your boss gives you a task, it's not like, okay, now go away and talk to nobody and then tell me when you made progress.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, the joke is engineers like put their headphones on and disappear into, like, they could sit in a closet and code, and that's not how it works. They're interacting with people, even if they're not, speaking. They're slacking all day long. Totally, they're communicating with people. And so asking them to do it in a vacuum is not in any way, shape, or form the way engineering is done. So it's actually not a true test of their ability to do the job.
Our engineers get bonus points if they, during one of these, coding sessions, if paired coding sessions, if they Google instead of sort of looking frustrated, and if they can Google well.
Yeah.
Like that's about, that's because also, that's how engineers work, right?
Also, if they ask for help, right?
Yeah.
From the person they're
definitely, because it's about collaboration for us as much as it's about the actual skill. So,
are there other alternatives to the take-home assignment?
I think paired programming is one of them. I think that's probably, in my opinion, probably the best. Having a technical phone screen, there's a lot of people that know how to answer the questions right.
Yep.
It's really going to be hard to truly assess someone's coding and inner team capabilities unless you have them sit down and do paired programming. So, I mean, the way that I think ideally it would work is have recruiters who really know how to, especially when you talk about engineering. I mean, there's other skills, but when recruiters who really know how to kind of dig in on some things when it comes to their technical abilities, they're never going to be as good. Well, I shouldn't say never. I met a recruiter the other day who's computer science grad. But they're most of the time not going to be as good as an engineer at being able to suss out somebody's coding capabilities. But if you can get a recruiter who's good at that, and then maybe have a front-end person that is on the engineering team, spend some time on the phone with them, asking them some kind of like, no-go type questions, and if they can answer them or they can't answer them, and spend a little bit of time on the culture stuff. If they've got a track record of being at a company and doing a good job at a company, if they have any code in some sort of open source repositories or things like that, that's a great place to look. If they're on Stack Overflow or GitHub or things like that, and they've got some good rankings and good followers, those are strong indicators that they're probably good.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's never going to be as good as like sitting down and coding with somebody.
Of course, yeah. Have you found yourself in an organization where you had to like rip out take-home assignments? Because like you say that there's a reason why people use it.
Yeah.
It does create sort of a bar that candidates have to clear. So have you ever like found yourself somewhere like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore?
Yeah, not recently. Last Mozilla, I was able to do that, and prior to that, at Deem, I was able to do that with a current customer or a current client of mine.
Right.
I was able to kind of show them the importance of not doing that. And one of the things I help them appreciate is what you're getting out of that is maybe you're reducing the interview fatigue potentially of the interview team, but what you're losing is speed. And when you're a small company and you're trying to compete against the big companies, the Ubers, the Googles, the Facebooks of the world, and insert any other big company out there, speed is what helps you, because those companies just can't move fast. They're just so process laden. And so I've been successful at a few places. I've been unsuccessful at places. Like I really, really wanted to rip that out at one place that I wasn't able to. I kind of wish I had Luke's data at the time, because it would have probably helped my argument a lot.
Right. I imagine there was, well, clearly in the cases where they kept it, there was pushback, but in the places where you were successful, that took some cajoling, no?
It did, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it took some cajoling. It took helping them appreciate. I mean, the thing that I was able to show them is just like, hey, look, Uber doesn't do it. These other companies, like name the company that you. So one of the things I will do is I'll say, who are we competing against? Who do you think we should recruit from, or who do you think are the companies that are going to be our biggest competitor to whatever talent? And when they name them, go and find out if they do that. And if they don't, that's a great argument. Like, look, we're competing against these guys and gals, and they don't do it, so we shouldn't. We need to be able to be competitive against them. And so it oftentimes is a lot of conversations, and a lot of times it's introducing them to people that are doing it other places so they can hear about how it's done. letting them talk to candidates. When a candidate says, "Oh, I'm interviewing with these 4 places and none of them are making me do it," that's good data to use to kind of make your argument.
Definitely. So now do we go to the the 2 pages of notes I had that we just cruise for like 20
I know
minutes?
you wanted to get to the project management, which I think is also like nice fertile ground, because I don't think we've covered that as a, I think that's an interesting perspective.
It is definitely fertile podcast ground. So Matthew, we were speaking earlier and you mentioned this idea you have of, or I guess a conception rather, of recruiters as project managers. And I never heard that before. And it just made sense because of all the multidisciplinary skills you have to have as a recruiter to be effective. So can you just kind of speak to that a little bit, like where that came from and how it's played out in your career?
Yeah. Where it came from, I don't know exactly. I just one day was kind of thinking about...
I guess you just being observant, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's just doing this a long time and kind of when I was trying to think about... People ask me all the time, like, what makes a good recruiter? And it's probably out of kind of thinking about that and thinking about what a recruiter does, what they truly do. They are project managers. Think about a project manager, take it out of recruiting. What does a project manager do? They usually have... especially when you think about within the engineering world or any type of thing, I don't care if it's building buildings, whatever, there are different people that are responsible to different aspects of a project in order to make it happen, whatever the outcome is. So there's an outcome for every project, and if that's to hire someone, if that's to build a building, if that's to push out a new feature on a product, on a software product, that's the outcome. And then throughout, from the beginning of that project until it happens, until the outcome is reached, there are multiple people that are involved in the execution of all sorts of different tasks along the path to a successful outcome. When you look at recruiting, you've got the recruiter, you've got candidates involved, you've got sourcers involved, you've got recruiting coordinators involved, you've got the recruiter involved, you've got interview participants involved, you have hiring manager involved, you have all these different tools involved. So you've got sourcing tools, you've got scheduling tools, you've got an ATS. You have, you probably are using Slack, you're using all these other different types of technologies and tools as well. The recruiter can do many of those things, but also at times will utilize other people and their ability and their bandwidths to do those things. So the ultimate job of the recruiter is to make sure that from the time that an intake meeting happens until that hire happens, all the trains run on time, all the different tasks happen in an efficient way, all the feedback gets looped in to improve the process along the way, so that at the very end you make a hire. So they're orchestrating many different people and tools and systems to reach that outcome, which to me is a project manager. And at the same time, recruiters are not just working on one project.
Right.
They're working on multiple projects. So someone who's very organized, who can think linearly, who can think very operationally, but also can adjust and move between different tracks, maybe multiple times within a day. That's a unique skill set. It's organized ADD, or I don't even know. It's somebody that has the ability to kind of multitask and think about many different things at one time, and yet keep everything going.
Yeah, like jazz.
Yeah. I like that.
So how have you taken people who might be really adept at certain recruiting skill sets, might be great at sales or great at, candidate engagement, but don't have the sort of project management playbook? How have you made them successful?
So I think there's been a couple things. I have actually sent recruiters to project management training, basic project management training. I have also paired them up with individuals that are very good at it. We have, with many different places I've been at, I usually, when you think about recruiting of different things, say, for example, you got a big bunch of engineering hires you need to make, and say it's like, I don't know, Ruby on Rails, full stack engineers. Usually, if there's a bunch of hires that need to happen, I'll have like a lead recruiter in there, and then I'll have maybe some more junior people underneath them supporting the whole overall effort to hire all those software engineers. And so if you've got someone who's really good maybe at sales, or really good at sourcing, or really good at something else, usually the lead recruiter, at least the way that I think, is a really good project manager. They're really good at driving things. And so pairing them up with someone who is good at that, who can kind of mentor them and train them as they go through the process of hiring all those roles, is just a great way to do it, just kind of on the job. You can also, there's all sorts of different types of project management courses that you can send people to that they can do online, they can do, off in their own time. But basic fundamental project management skills is a great thing for them to have. And so that I will train them either on the job or sometimes send them off to training.
And I'm so curious. So what kinds of outcomes do you see from, like, what do you notice as having changed after project management school? Are they just more organized, or is it more than that?
So it's more than that. But yes, they're definitely more organized. I measure my recruiters, and it's not just recruiters. I've managed HR people and facilities people and IT people and stuff in the past. I manage everybody on 3 basic fundamental things. One, what's their output? So everybody's got an output. Whatever their job is, there's something that they have to create.
Number of podcasts.
Yeah. That would be one of the outputs, and number and quality of podcasts, right? So that's an output. What do their customers say about them? So a recruiter's customer, there are many. They're the candidates, they're the recruiting coordinators, they're the sourcers, they're the interview participants, they're the hiring managers. And what is their team? So those 3 things: product, output, customers, and team feedback. And what you see when somebody becomes much more adept at being, managing projects and understanding project management fundamentals, their customers usually love what they're doing because they start driving the customer. A recruiter that is really good at this will push back more, will say no more, will hold people more accountable, will drive the process much more. And the reality is, as hiring managers, that's what they want. They're so busy throughout the day that they really want someone they want to be able to say, go run with this, come to me when I need to jump into the process, engage with me when and where I need to engage. And they want to be able to trust that the person that they're asking to do that will do it. Unfortunately, most of the time they've had experiences that make them not trust. And that's why hiring managers oftentimes will get very micromanagement in the process. And so when you've got someone who's learned these skills, you will hear from the customer feedback from the hiring managers that so-and-so is doing awesome. They've turned a corner. The way that they're driving things is so much better. The quality of candidates I'm seeing is better. The speed at which we're working is so much better. So you'll hear that feedback there. You'll hear it from the team members, because if people are much more organized, we've all worked with recruiters who are not organized, and they'll send something to the recruiting coordinator saying, "Hey, can you schedule this interview for Jane to meet with this team here?" And it turns out it's the wrong candidate for the wrong interview team for the wrong job, or whatever, or you will see people become much more organized. And so then the team that is working with them, supporting them, is happier. The sources are happier. The coordinators are happier. Everybody else is happier. And then usually what you'll end up seeing is an uptick in the output. If they were hiring, 2 people a month, now they're hiring 2.5 or 3, because they're more efficient and more organized. So usually you see an uptick on all 3 of those if they are really good at the project management fundamentals.
That's awesome. And I love that by investing in them and their project management skills, you're also making them more successful in whatever future role they hold, because it's not specific to, it's not like, go take this class on sourcing. Yeah. Well, what if they want to be a VP of people one day? They're not going to be doing much sourcing, but you can always use better project management skills. Yeah. And I mean, kind of on a tangent, as you guys, I think I've talked with you about a little bit, there's certain skills that are going to go away in recruiting in a short time frame with technology and the advancements of technology. And so what are the core skills that make a good recruiter? It's not necessarily the sourcing, because top of the funnel is going to become automated. Coordination is going to become automated. Mm-hmm. So what is going to still be there that's going to require a human? And it's going to be keeping all the trains on time. It's going to be going and running down the hiring manager who is not giving you feedback on the candidate. It's going to be going and making sure that you've got the actual, you've had the conversations with the hiring manager to think about all of the things you're putting into the system at the top of the funnel that's doing the sourcing for you. So that skill set is being good at project management is going to allow you to be relevant as a recruiter for a long time. If your game and your bailiwick right now is sourcing, I hate to say it, there's going to be a lot less sources out there in a few years. Right. Learn how to build in-person relationships too.
Yeah, exactly. Learn how to interact with humans. Yeah.
Going back to where you see the impacts of the project management, you would probably also see it in time to fill, right?
For sure.
Because just coming with the organization aspect, you would see follow-up happening at a better clip, getting even as simple as keeping your ATS data clean, which if you forget to close out candidates in your ATS, then your time to fill is going to look really nasty, right? But being on top of that is going to tighten up all those metrics.
Well, yeah, there's the perceived time to fill with the ATS not being up to date, and the real time to fill. And the reality is, when you're really focused on, when you're a good project manager, you're focused on process and efficiencies, and you're not going to waste time on things that you don't, that are not worth spending time on. You're going to do things in a way where it's not going to create problems down the road as well. So yeah, I mean, you're going to compress the overall time to fill for sure if you're good at it.
Definitely. We've stumbled somewhat organically upon recruiting metrics, and I would love to hear which ones you think are important, somewhat selfishly, because I'm gonna plug future content here. I'm gonna do a whole series on recruiting metrics, and I'm just like I just brainstormed like 20 that I was going like, these are ones I should cover. So I'm curious, what are the key ones that you look at, and I guess make the business case for various arms of recruitment?
Yeah. So I mean, it depends on the audience you're talking to. For me, like as a leader in recruiting, I'm looking at just number of hires per month, like for my team. Like I'm looking for individual number of hires per month. That's where I start. And if those look good, I'm not going to go too deep into the funnel. If I start to hear things from the customers, the hiring managers, that they're dissatisfied with certain things about the way things are done, then I'll go up the funnel from there. But that's where you start. I mean, ultimately, we're recruiters. Our job, we're not brought on to make phone screens. We're not brought on to, have a certain number of interviews a month. We're brought on to make hires.
Right.
And so number of hires, number of hires. And then I think also another important thing very closely related to that is percentage of offers accepted. Those are two really important ones. And if you start seeing degradation in those, that's when you start going up the funnel and trying to figure out what the impact is. And then from there, I mean, a good rule of thumb is, if for every 3 on-sites, and this is a pretty standard long-term metric, for every 3 on-sites, it'd be good to have an offer. Now, in really competitive marketplaces, that number could change. But if you start getting to the point where you're like 9 or 10 on-sites and you have 1 offer, that's not a good number. In fact, earlier today, I was talking with a potential client. They had 40 on-sites and got 1 offer.
Wow.
And I asked the person if they felt that was a realistic number. Unfortunately, they understood that wasn't. This wasn't.
Were you able to diagnose what the problem was there?
No, I was only there for about 30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I asked a bunch of questions about like what's their comp, and
right.
I think
because it opens up this amazing can of worms where you say
could be so many things.
It could be like 20 different things,
Yeah.
and then you start diving in to find out what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it could be so many. I mean, if we had time, I asked for kind of a snapshot of like that specs funnel, and I mean, it could be anything from something as simple as the people that are doing the interviews are not aligned.
Right.
Like I give the
often, if you have 40 on-sites to 1 offer, that to me that's the sniff test.
Yeah, I mean, the illustration I give is like if half the people on the team are looking for a 5'8" person with brown eyes, and the other half of the team is looking for a 6'2" person with blue eyes, you're never going to find the right person, right? And so like you got to get people aligned. And sometimes people forget to even just do that, just to make sure that everybody realizes we're looking for this type of person, and that way you can actually make a good decision. But yeah, with that one, I don't know.
Right.
I have to spend a bunch more time with that one. Other metrics, like the ratio is all the way up. So like that 3 to 1 is a good number. So for every 3 phone screens, you should probably get, when I say phone screens, like hiring manager, technical phone screen, what it is, an on-site. So that ratio of 3 I like to look at. Those can be different. I mean, if you're doing like inside sales roles, they can maybe be less all the way across. If you're doing data science roles, they could be more. Data engineering, something like that, they could be more. But if you start with that, and then based off of your experience with the type of roles that you're looking for, as well as like the speed at which you're trying to hire, as well as the bar of the company, as well as the geo you're in. I mean, there's lots of different things that affect that number, but those are good numbers all the way down. I usually like to look at.
I have a question for you about metrics, but not necessarily about the sourcing funnel, and that is, so at your last company, you led people, so you had recruiting and people ops under you. And I'm wondering how you think about attrition as it relates to the effectiveness of your recruiting org, because I also own both of those functions. And so I think it's very seamless. And I think if you're having an attrition problem, the first place you would start is actually what happened on the hiring. Was it a mishire? If so, how could we have identified that? But I also think in other organizations, maybe you're not allowed to point a finger so much at recruiting, because it's like, oh no, it was an attrition problem. So it happened when the employee was actually here. And how do you think about that?
I think a lot about that. I would love to be able to have true long-term access to data when it comes to being very granular about that. Like, so for example, even down on the interview team, like which interview teams do a good job of identifying people that stay.
Yes. Interview calibration.
Yeah, exactly.
Aligning that to the quality of the hire and the tenure of the employee.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at that type of data, looking at the, looking at the hiring managers, which hiring managers make decisions on people that have a tendency to stay. That's great data to have. I think it's the recruiter's responsibility, as well as like to partner with HR to get that information. It's hard because the reality is like that's a multi-year data set, right? And so you have to have the ability to have that data, to be able to be patient enough to wait on that data, because it takes time to be able to gather it. But it's important. I mean, I'll give you an example back from Mozilla. We were trying to figure out like what made a good, we called them Mozillian, what made a good Mozillian. And so we looked at people that had been there for more than 3 years. And what it turned out is there was a very high percentage of employees at Mozilla who had been there for more than 3 years, who in some form or another outside of work volunteered. They volunteered for Habitat for Humanity or a political action campaign or for their church or whatever. They just did some sort of volunteer work. They felt like giving back. So then when you start thinking about the kind of the 4 box of like the total addressable market, you always want to try and go after that upper right corner. When you take that total addressable market in the upper right corner, upper right quadrant, and then you add in the variable of do they volunteer? And almost everybody puts on their LinkedIn or their Facebook or someplace that they do some sort of volunteer work. So if I'm looking for a Java engineer, with a certain type of skill set, or an HTML5 or CSS or whatever engineer, which is what a lot of the things we were looking at Mozilla, if I enter that variable of they also do some sort of volunteering, talking about efficiencies, those people are a lot more likely to both accept the job and stay on the job. And so you're not spending time. Yeah, you might have a bunch of candidates out there that are amazing, but if they're never going to accept the job, don't spend the time on them or spend less time on them. Go after the ones that are likely to accept the job and are likely to stay. And if there's indicators internally about that as well that you can then take and introduce into the recruiting process, that's a great thing to do. So
I'm curious, how did you manage to measure or identify that the correlation was on volunteering? Because that's not something that's typical in your HRIS, like it's not a field. You had to clearly think to pull this data separately and see.
Well, it was something we anecdotally kind of realized a lot of people do. And then when we had Workday implemented and everybody's uploading all their information, it was something you could pull up through that. Yeah. Because people can put their personal information in there, their LinkedIn.
Right.
And so it was something anecdotally we just kind of noticed, like there's a lot of people here. Mozilla specifically is a place where people that kind of have like a desire to do something more than just like work for a capital organization. They want to like do something good for humanity. It was not a huge leap. It wasn't like we were geniuses. It was, you kind of noticed it anyways, but then we went and pulled some data together and realized that our assumption was correct. And then we made a choice to insert that into the recruiting process.
But that's another example of where post source, post interview, post hire in this case, information needs to be extrapolated and then applied back to the recruiting cycle. Yeah. So in this case, with that, volunteer work being such a positive indicator of successful employee, obviously you're not just going to make that a job requirement, but you can focus your efforts on closing those candidates who, like you say, are more likely to accept anyway.
Yeah, but you can also insert that, like for example, on LinkedIn, people put that on their profile. So you could, if you're using LinkedIn as a tool to search, you could put something in there
when you're sourcing.
Yeah, when you're sourcing for the top of the funnel. So you can also put that in the job description. Like, some of the things that people here love to do are, like this. So it might be something under just kind of the extras about us that might attract people.
Lead with that in some of your recruiting emails.
Yeah.
Once you've identified something that's important to that person, it makes sense. Like, let's talk about how much we do of that at this company.
Right. Are there other examples of that? Like just taking, I guess there's probably a million, just being able to reorient your hiring process based on feedback or information you get on successful employees or successful candidates post fact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess other examples are, a lot of places have a tendency to focus on certain schools and like, the great engineers come out of this school or these handful of schools. If you end up finding, you made hires, especially a great place to kind of challenge that is in the intern program. And if you get interns from other places besides those schools, you might have your 5 or 6 schools that you work with, or however many you work with, and then you get 2 or 3 every year that maybe come from other places outside of that. And then it turns out that these people are great. That could challenge your assumption that like this is the only place to get people is out of certain schools. That is something that we actually absolutely saw in a couple different places I was at, Mozilla and Instacart, both, that the school doesn't necessarily matter as much anymore. It has to do with their passion, and some of these individuals nowadays that are in their early to mid 20s, they've been coding since before they were in college.
Right. Yeah.
And so like the school doesn't necessarily matter as much. And so at Instacart, we removed the education as a requirement. We didn't care about that. Just as long as they could demonstrate that they could do the job, it doesn't matter if they went to college or not. It doesn't matter if they went to any coding school or not.
Did that result in far more inbound applications?
So we didn't necessarily. We targeted a lower percent. We didn't want to have a lot of our hires through applications. I kind of am a bit of a stickler around that. I want my recruiting team, if they're doing a good job, the number one source of candidates coming in to get hired should be passive candidates that we're sourcing.
Okay. So let me rephrase then.
Yeah.
Taking job requirements off, did that result in far more voluminous?
Larger addressable
pipelines?
market. Yeah. So when you think about the total addressable market of your candidates, if you restrict it to people with degrees or have gone to certain schools, that's reducing your pool of candidates that you can go after. And so what it does is, it opens up just a bigger pool of candidates to go after. And then if you start introducing variables into the search that are unique to the company, that gives you a good subset of people you can target.
So then I'm guessing, like once you took that off, was there any impact on quality of candidate?
No, I don't think it was quality. So what I think it was is that there's people that we were able to bring through the process that got hired and even got to offer stage, maybe we didn't hire, that would never have made it otherwise.
Right.
Because we've been like, we never would have looked at them. We would just discounted them because they didn't have that criteria that's no longer there.
Yeah. Was it hard to get any of either any of your team or any of the hiring managers or the execs on board with this notion of, actually, we are not going to have any education requirements? I
would say 50-50. Fortunately at Instacart, our VP of engineering was very progressive in that thought. He was very on board with that. There were a few people early on who were resistant to it. When I first joined Instacart, we hadn't hired our VP of engineering. And so and I was for this. I'm very much a believer that it's more about whether they can do the job as opposed to anything that happened prior. But before I got there, like when I talked, there was 2 recruiters when I joined. They basically said they won't look at anybody unless they have those type of degrees and that type of and certain types of background. And so we worked with them. We talked to them about, some people cited companies like Google that's what they did. And I had to help them understand that the reason why Google did it was different than the reason why you would do it. Google did it because they have 70,000 applicants a week and they need to cull 90% of those. So they have a working amount. They have an amount of people that they can actually work with. And they actually don't care about education either. It's a myth that they do. But unfortunately, so many places hear that, and like these managers at Instacart initially were like, they have to have this type of background. When the VP of Eng came on board, he was one of my best allies around that. He was very forward-thinking, and he was able to help me and the recruiting team bring people around. That is one of the realities of your job as a recruiter is a lot, but oftentimes because you're not an engineer, your voice is maybe sometimes not as easily and readily accepted as a voice of truth until you bring in people like someone like Udi or other people who have their respect.
Definitely.
So partner with those folks all you can.
I don't think it's ever been this easy to fill the hour. We was totally cruised here. I had all these notes that we didn't even need to cover, but this has been amazing. And I would be remiss if I didn't let you talk a little bit about Talent Remastered. I'm personally curious. Like, what's the whole idea over there?
Yeah, there's actually 2 things that I'm working on right now. Talent Remastered is one of them, and that actually takes up kind of less time than Rocket Powered. But Talent Remastered is Perry's background is she was an executive recruiter. She has founded 2 software companies. So she's, and then she's done a bunch of recruiting herself. So she's got this interesting breadth of experience as a founder of a couple companies, as a recruiter, and then she's also doing coaching now. And so her philosophy around what makes a good recruiter and what is available for recruiters out there and mine kind of align. I feel like there's an underinvestment in recruiting in general by organizations, and I don't mean tools or software or things like that. Organizations view recruiting as like a real-time, on-demand need, and so they don't think of it long-term a lot of times in investing in providing career training or leadership training to the recruiters in the organization. And so a lot of recruiters that rise to the top, they're just good. They don't get a lot of mentorship. And we feel there's a lot of recruiters out there that could benefit from true career development. And so Talent Remastered is coaching, career development, and is in a collaborative nature, in a collaborative setting with large subsets of people, to just kind of elevate the job of a recruiter, kind of elevate the recruiting function in general. To make, we want to see all the recruiters out there become project managers. We want to see all the recruiters out there be much better than they currently are and get a lot of the career development that they just don't get from organizations. And so we feel like we could provide that through Talent Remastered and provide it on a broad scale to all the recruiters out there, at least for right now, and we'll keep it focused in the United States. But yeah, once I learn Chinese and other languages, maybe we can do it other places.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds perfect for our audience too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty exciting. We're gonna have a lot of guest speakers come in and do we're gonna do 3 times a month these video conferences where we're gonna cover specific subjects and kind of similar to something like this, but it's gonna be very focused on providing training to the recruiters on a very specific subject. So I've got some people lined up that I want to have speak on it, and we'll have some good content for people. So yeah,
cool. That's amazing.
Yeah,
stay tuned for more from Talent Remastered. Go check it out. Mathew, this has been an amazing episode. Thank you so much for coming in.
Fantastic.
Anytime you want to come back. I mean, I feel like we could have kept going for another hour, but I'll let you carry on with your life.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for coming in. Jill Woody, always a pleasure. Jill.
Always a pleasure on my end.
Jill, what was it? Jill of all trades, Woody. Glad to have you back as always. And to all of you out there in podcast land, thank you so much for tuning in once more. I've been Rob Stevenson. You've been amazing, wonderful, talented recruiters. Have a spectacular week and happy hunting.